Hi, this is Ashley Kang of ESPN Esports. I'm joined by Max Atlus Anderson, one of the casters of the LCK, and we're gonna just talk about the recap of the LCK Spring Split as well as talk about the upcoming 2019 MSI.
Nailed it! Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for saying yes to the interview.
Oh, you are more than welcome. I actually requested this. I wanted this to go on record saying, Ashley, I would like to have an interview. So there you go.
This is so touching. Okay, let's get straight into it. You recently casted LCK Finals, which was the Griffin versus SKT. It was a pretty hyped up match, and it was held at Jamsi Arena, very historic place for the LCK. So what was it like for you? What was it like casting for that Griffin versus SKT?
I was actually a bit more nervous than I would normally be. Often with my line of work, I've been doing it for a very long time, so nerves aren't normally a thing. But with an arena like that, and the fact that it was the first LCK TriCast since Monty Doa and Papa did it at the same arena, the Jamshid Indoor Stadium, that meant that there was a little bit more on our shoulders. I felt like we did a great job. I thought it was fantastic that we had LS with us when the Avengers duo on the bottom side of the map came in. We were really, really lucky to have his insight. So I think it went really, really well, but I was more nervous beforehand than I thought I would be.
Okay. And to talk about that actual matchup a little bit, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it led up to it since the beginning of the Spring Split. It was supposed to be the finals, the super team SKT versus the super rookies Griffin, and everyone was like, oh, it's gonna go to game 5, especially after that best of 3 in SKT versus Griffin, which was also close. But when we opened the box, it didn't turn out to be close at all. It was pretty much a stomp from SKT's side, and the match score was 3-0. So what do you think just happened there? Did SKT just turn up and achieve a godhood, or did Griffin just didn't turn up?
I actually think this is a really interesting discussion, because going into the series, I found it really hard to gauge where I was putting what would be assumed out of the series. Because when you're a commentator, you come into a matchup and you say, well, what is the assumed outcome? How do I frame this match around that so that whatever the outcome is, it's going to get the hype and the recognition that it deserves? And I felt this one was really, really difficult, because Griffin qualified first place very early. They were dominating at the first round robin. This was an unprecedented scoreline for this team, and it was amazing to watch. And then they started to fall off. The Genji loss, the Afrika loss, and you put that down to, oh, well, they've already locked in playoffs, they're not trying as hard, blah, blah, blah. Then they get smashed by Kingzone, and I start thinking okay, is this still, do we still give them all of the hype that they deserved after that SKT 2-1 victory that they secured in that incredible match? Afterwards we just said we wanted to watch Griffin versus SKT best of 5s forever, because it looks like the best League of Legends that we'll get. But after losing to Kingzone, and then SKT crushing Kingzone in their best of 5 to get into the final, it was hard to still give Griffin all of that recognition from their earlier success. And I actually predicted a 3-1 in favor of SKT for that final. And I know there are a lot of people that said that Griffin should be winning, and on paper after their season, they should have. But momentum is so huge in this game. SKT come off a run like that with they're like a train crushing forwards. And Griffin tried to stand in their way, they couldn't.
So another thing that is interesting to me is, as you told me just now, Griffin had an unprecedented run, especially in the first half of the Spring Split, and they were in the number 1 of the ESPN Power Ranking for ages, and everyone was already talking about, hey, we can't wait to see Griffin in the MSI, which is not the case anymore. And they didn't even give a close fight on that final in SKT versus Griffin. So specific to Griffin, what do you think has happened?
I think it's actually really difficult to talk about, because around Griffin, almost all of the teams changed drastically. You've got UCal leaving, KT going to Afrika Freaks. You've got that whole team changing, Kuro leaving, and then Kramer also going over to the LPL. You've got KT completely exploding. Congratulations, just made their way back into the LCK for 2019. But the fact that KT go from champions in 2018 to in the promotion tournament just shows how much of an upheaval of talent we had and a moving around of chess pieces, right? And SKT got the dream, right? They were toted the dream team at the beginning of the Kesper Cup. This team looked incredibly strong on paper. But on paper, only means so much. Like, League of Legends is a team game, it's a communication-based game, and it's a game where you have to play as a unit if you're going to win. And Griffin had the added advantage of having the same roster moving from 2018 to 2019. So they came in and they were actually given a pretty good hand, because a lot of our teams were still trying to figure themselves out, still trying to work out how they're supposed to win. And I think that is a large reason as to why Sandbox and Damwon both did very well and got into the playoffs, because although they were challenger teams, they were strong coming from challenger. A lot of the teams were scrimming against Damwon and losing during Worlds last year, things like that. And they didn't have to change their rosters all that much either. And it means that once things have now settled, once SKT are starting to live up to their hype with the fact that these players have learned how to play together, I think the playing field for Griffin has changed instead of them maybe falling off as far as power level. And I think a lot of it comes down as well to confidence and things like that, because the last time Griffin and SKT faced before the final, Griffin also looked like they couldn't team fight on the same level as SKT, and SKT lost because of better map movements, intelligent play, avoiding fights, rather than actually taking them in straight up League of Legends. So unfortunately for Griffin, they tried to play straight up League of Legends against SKT, and they didn't manage to. But I don't think it really says too much about Griffin faltering and things like that. It says more about SKT's rise to power and the rest of the LCK also figuring themselves out. I mean, Kingzone are on a very similar line, right? Like, if Kingzone had have had a better performance against SKT, and then I think a lot more people would have been talking about how well they've been playing as the season moves on.
Like, so the rise of power of SKT has certainly been something to watch for. But also, if you look at other regions, the teams that we hyped up at the beginning of the season did make it to MSI. So at the LEC, the G2 has just qualified for MSI by 3-0ing Origin, and in NA, the LCS, the Team Liquid, has also qualified for the MSI. We are still yet to see who the LPL champions are going to be. So if you do watch the other regions, so what are your thoughts on the champions from those respective regions? What are your thoughts about their power level?
I think G2 looks terrifying. They look absolutely amazing. And not only from a gameplay standpoint, because they've got caps, they've got perks, they've got huge names as far as EU are concerned. This team is, to call it a super team would almost be an understatement based on EU. And the thing that I love about G2 the most is their draft. The way they dismantled Sona Taric with the funnel strategy, like out-cheesing the cheese like that, was just unbelievable. Really beautiful to see. The thing I want to see now is G2 perform internationally, because there's been memes around this. I'm not going to repeat it, don't want to jinx anything, but putting your money where your mouth is the position that we're at here in the LCK as well. And I think that that needs to be for everyone. I think the LPL looks dominant. They look strong. IG didn't change. That is still a pretty good, I guess, line to draw in the sand. And if you can come up to that team's level, then that's going to be strong. Because, like, look, Fnatic didn't challenge IG in the final. I'm glad that we're seeing new blood, even though Caps is back to try and get some revenge potentially against IG. Unless JDG managed to make it, I'd be excited to see Imp possibly make his way back forward for another international showing, because it's been a really long time since he's been up there after the Samsung White days back in 2014. Jesus, I feel old. Oh my goodness. And looking at Team Liquid, they just look like they're still the same dominant team, but now they've got Core JJ. And we've got a lot of experience with how good Core JJ is, and it looks like him and Doublelift have actually formed some synergy before I was expecting it to form. So yes, it was a really exciting final. I really enjoyed it, but I felt like from about halfway through the split, I felt like it was just going to be Team Liquid again. Yeah.
So, like, after 2018, where Koreans simply did not turn up to the international events, the narrative of Korea is going to dominate the international tournaments is over. We might have a new era dawning upon us. So, and G2 with Cavs, and like might be reflecting that. But however, we have a legend returning to the MSI. You know, we have Faker and we have SKT now playing against the other regions, and we are going to see Faker in the international tournament again. So, what do you think that means to LCK? Like the fact that Faker is now returning to an international stage, and yeah.
Well, I think that this is the final test for the LCK. I felt like 2018 was a weird year, right? We had a lot of teams that were untested internationally and also tested and failed internationally heading towards Worlds and, of course, MSI earlier on. It was a really disappointing year, but there was a name missing. SKT are a team, I think, that go beyond just the LCK, right? We're used to talking about Korea as winning everything, right? Before 2018 happened, it was Korea final 2017 that Gen.G were able to get over SKT, but SKT have always been that name that has existed at the top of the LCK. And so now the rest of the world needs to prove that they can take down the final boss. And I don't know whether it's something that SKT have as players, because I mean the players have all changed now, right? So things could be different on the international stage. But when I give the LCK reins over to Coma, it makes me feel good. You know, I'm in a comfortable place when SKT are the team representing, because they haven't let us down a lot. They have a couple of times, but they haven't let us down a lot, and they're a really scary force to deal with. So now that we had our previous discussion about SKT and how their power level continues to rise, can it rise to meet that of the international teams at MSI? We'll have to find out. But then even after that, even if it doesn't succeed, does that power level just continue forward to Worlds? Like, I don't know, only time will tell.
Thank you for the interview. I do have one final question, if that's okay. Because now I'm curious. We just talked about how much of an upheaval 2019 Spring Split was for LCK. In the beginning of the Spring Split, we had like the rise of all the rookies, you know, Griffin at first place, Sandbox at the second place, and we thought this was a generation change. But after a while, the old team started to get their teamworks together, and in the end, it was what we saw at 2014, 2015, 2016, SKT back at top. So what are you looking forward to changing or new forces rising in the 2019 LCK summer split?
The thing that I'm looking forward to mostly is seeing how the teams utilize all of these new, I guess, tools that they have available to them, right? Because a lot of what we saw in spring that was disappointing from the LCK was the misuse of incredible powers that a lot of these teams have, right? You take, for example, Gen.G floundering so hard because they can't play around Peanut's playstyle as well as, say, Kingzone could in the past, especially domestically. Like, things like this need to be taken into account, and a lot of what we don't actually see when we watch a game of League of Legends is extraordinarily important. There are things like tilt, there are things like veteran status, there's keeping a level head, and there's also having these powerhouse young players that can get excited, that can motivate, that can make sure that you can still feel like you're excited to play the game, you know, day in, day out. So there are a lot of things that I think are really important about meshing a team together and finding out exactly what the right players to use are. I think a Freak of Freaks are the perfect example, because I believe they played 13 people across different roles throughout the spring split. So if there's anything to epitomize the fact that most of our teams haven't figured themselves out yet, it would be that team. And I'm hoping that in the summer split, we can see exactly what the ideas are from these teams that they're trying to execute, rather than see these teams trying to figure out exactly what the right ideas are to have in the first place. And I know that sounds a little bit convoluted, but I'm excited to see whether or not these teams can get themselves together moving into summer, because that's the important one, right? Winning Worlds, that's the goal. MSI would be great too, but winning Worlds is the ultimate goal, and getting LCK back on top where it belongs is what we need to try and do here.
I especially do like the last sentence, I gotta say. Okay, I don't know whether it was possible, but I'm even more excited for MSI.
That's my job, I'm the hype guy.
And thank you so much for saying yes to the interview once again.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, this was Ashley Kang of ESPN Esports. I was joined by Max Atlus Anderson of the LCK, one of the LCK casters here at Low Park. And for more League of Legends content, check out espn.com/esports.